This map is showing kind of a phased development of several things that happened over a 3-year period. The first project that you're going to see is the main focus of today is the green at College Park, which is this piece right here. We were working on a lot of projects for the city of Arlington at the time. We were actually putting Center Street on a road diet and making it more narrow and in implementing more sidewalks and places for pedestrians. And through that work that we were doing, the university came to us and said, you know, we feel like we have a back door to the city, that Center Street is not a front door, and we want it to be a front door and really tie into everything that the city of Arlington is doing. And we have this piece of property that we've recently purchased, and it's located at the corner of Mitchell and Center Street, which is this area right here. And you'll notice if you are familiar with the UTA campus, Mitchell is one of the southern borders of UTA. And we actually need you to help us do a feasibility study and tell us what we need to put there. We did a lot of research on campus at the time and realized that there's students that live in housing on this side of the campus were playing frisbee and even baseball in parking lots. I don't know how many windows were broke out, but what really stood out to us is the people who are living there. UTA's population is kind of evolving where more and more people are starting to live on campus. And as that's happening, they need green space. So we came to the university and we told them that, you know, you need a park here. And we can start to create a nice front door. And we also started planting the seeds with them of what a better message that you could present to the community if your new front door was a sustainable front door. And at the same time, they were developing a sustainability committee that were kind of pushing those types of developments on the campus. So we had a lot of forces working in our favor. Some of the things that we were bringing and telling them, they were hearing from others. So it was not a hard sell, which was really nice. As we started working on that project, we were hired by HKS Architects to work on College Park Center, which is just north of the green at College Park. Originally, that project was supposed to be located at the corner of Cooper and Mitchell, but the university saw that the park development could be a good anchor and catalyst, and that it could also serve the event center. So they relocated it to the site. And as we were working with HKS Architects, we came to the architect and the owner and presented the idea that why don't we look at the green and College Park Center as one project. I know for money purposes we've got to have a dividing line and we're going to have 2 different contractors, but let's design them together because there's some opportunities there. And the university was totally in favor of that, and we were really fortunate that we could kind of look at a larger scale on the project. As we were working on this, we were hired by Jacobs Architects to work on this part, which is a mixed-use development called College Park, and that's actually kind of the name that named everything else, even though it was the last project to come online. It's student housing, university offices, and also a lot of kind of mixed use. It's a great place to go grab some unique food. It's not your typical type of chain restaurants around the Metroplex. What was really scary about this project is when we were hired to do that, the university told us that we were the glue that held everything together. And we're the landscape architect and the civil engineer, and that's not usually how it goes. So we were in the middle of 3 projects going on at one time in 3 different meetings for everything, hearing contradicting comments about what was going to happen and be done. And we were the ones that were trying to keep a cohesive blend together. So it appeared to be one project that created a great urban environment for the university. So it was a fun and a challenging time, and I think I have some gray hairs now that I used to didn't have because of that project. We're really going to focus on the green and the portion of the green that blends around College Park Center. The green, we were also, because of some of the sustainable initiatives, we were very honored that we were selected as a pilot program by the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center for the Sustainable Sites Initiative. I'm a big advocate of sustainable sites because up until that point, it was hard to get a LEED rating if you didn't have, you couldn't get a LEED rating if you didn't have a building. And yet sometimes we can make a greater impact on our environment if we manage our sites properly. So I think that's a really valuable initiative. And this is one of 3 projects that were the first ones in the nation to be certified. I think they have a couple of others that have been certified since. Since we did design the project at the same time as College Park Center. We actually included this in the LEED boundary for College Park Center, and it's been certified LEED Gold. And it also has won a Texas ASLA honor award for the design of the project. This is what we had when we started out with. When I told you the university said that they turned their back to the city, this is what their back looked like. And it was 82% impervious surface over 8.5 acres. Not only was it not pretty, but it wasn't very environmentally friendly. The pervious area that we did have, I've nicknamed grass fault because it was really old parking lots that have been broken down and grass is finally taking over. So we had some challenging existing conditions, but with that said, it's really easy to start to make a good improvement when you're dealing with this. I mean, we could just increase our perviousness and start to make big impacts. I love the University of Texas in Arlington as a client. They're a great client, but they threw a "oh, by the way" at us as we were starting on this project. And it was, "oh, by the way, we have this drainage channel that you need to look at because we have some flooding issues." And Larry is going to really get into that, but from a landscape architect, what I realized is the flooding issues ended up being possibly putting $400,000 worth of pipe in to solve a problem when my planning budget was $400,000. So even though it was an issue and a "oh, by the way," I think it led to a really positive solution for the university. And we're excited to have been a part of it. And Larry's going to kind of explain the madness of figuring out what that meant.
Well, once we saw that there was a drainage ditch running through the property there, it was important for us to determine, what in the world's going on. So here is our 3-acre site. There's Mitchell and there's Center Street. This ditch emptied into a 48-inch pipe that ran under Mitchell Street and then headed south to a tributary of Johnson Creek. The first thing we did was we spent time talking to facility staff at the university and staff at the city of Arlington to determine just historically what's happening at this location. Well, there's a low point there in Mitchell Street, and we were told that oftentimes that street would flood. And on more than one occasion, there was so much water in that street that it spilled over into the apartment complexes on the south side of the street and flooded them. So we knew that we had a significant issue there, that the pipe was overloaded. As a result, the inlets weren't functioning properly in this low point at Mitchell Street, and there was flooding. So we decided what we need to do is we need to figure out how much water is going there. Well, there were a few contour maps of the university, but there wasn't anything that really indicated what the drainage area was. So Ben over here and myself, we walked the campus, and there's the drainage area. 45 fully developed acres were draining through our little 3.5-acre park. And as Jana said, that was going to cause a significant change in costs. Now, here's the existing conditions again. We had one other little issue pop up that was kind of interesting. Let's see, is this 3rd Street?
Yeah, 3rd Street's right there.
All right. That's 3rd Street. There is a low point in what used to be called Pecan Street. It's Spaniola now. Low point right here. Now, the great thing about 3rd Street was if the inlets couldn't handle the water there in Pecan, there was positive overflow from from 3rd Street all the way down to Mitchell. So that was a good thing. The problem was there was a special events center being constructed. Let me show you the footprint of that.
Show where the door.
Well, okay. There's the door.
Below ground.
Yeah. All right, so the footprint cut off 3rd Street. There was no longer a 3rd Street. And where the low point inlets were located was one of the entries into the Special Events Center. So that was a big oops. And we had to determine what needed to be done there. So we sat down with the university staff, again, facility staff, said, you've got a really serious issue here. You've got this multi-million-dollar facility with your competition court and your practice courts all below grade. We need to have a 100-year design at this intersection here because you have no positive overflow. And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, that means you got to add about 50, 60 linear feet of additional inlet space throughout this area, and what was considered to be a 48-inch pipe now turns into a 6x4 box culvert. And there's the $400,000 that Jana got all worked up about. So what we did was we started looking at ways to handle the drainage in such a way that we wouldn't have to spend all that money in pipe cost. And so part of what we did was we did a few creative things in College Park. Now in the green in College Park, we've got this oval lawn that you'll get to see, and Jana will talk about later. What we did to help handle the drainage was we created what we called a storm spring. Basically, it's a Y inlet, a reverse inlet. And let me explain this to you. Don't get real nervous when I explain this. I'll tell you how it works. You've got a 6x4 box culvert coming in to this storm spring. Exiting that is a 48-inch pipe. So, 6x4 box, 48, something's not going to work there. It's designed so that in 25-year storms and above, water comes out of this reverse inlet into that oval space, and that serves as a detention area. Now the 48-inch pipe then continues on south, ties into the existing 48 that goes under Mitchell Street, and there's no longer a flooding problem there because that operates more efficiently, the inlets work, and you don't have the problem with a bunch of ponding water there. So that's the approach we took to handle this significant amount of water, basically 360 CFS in a 100-year storm. So as we analyzed this and we looked at the hydrograph, the 1-year hydrograph, which is there on the left, there's no real difference. Reason being, we're at the very, very low end of this drainage area, and what we're doing is not going to have a significant impact on a 1-year storm. On the 100-year storm, however, because of some of the things we're doing, especially using this storm spring and some of the other things Jana will talk about, we actually had a 23% reduction in the peak flow right there. So there is some things happening there from an economic approach as well as a drainage approach. And I'll let Jana talk about some of the other things we did within the park.
One of the interesting stories about Larry coming up with the idea for the storm spring is when him and Ben were doing the drainage area map for the campus. They took all these pictures, and I'm looking through their pictures, and the university has manholes that are chained down. And I was in a meeting talking to them and said, are people stealing your manholes? And I guess this is the landscape architect version. I didn't get what was going on, and they're like, no, when it rains, even during a small event, they pop up, they pop off. I'd hate to be a pedestrian walking across the campus back when that happened. But so we realized that we had a huge issue, but we also realized that we had a huge opportunity to start to make an impact on the campus. And I was really excited that we had all of this water coming into our site, but we had to work together on a very collaborative manner to come up with a solution, because when I go into a meeting with a bunch of engineers and tell them that I want to manage 40 acres of water in 3.5 acres, they tell me I need a 9-foot deep hole, and that I'm probably going to want to put a fence around it to ensure safety. And that wasn't what I wanted, because we wanted to create a space for people. So we had to come up with a compromise. And that's what Larry was just talking about, that we had to realize that we could manage out all the water that our site generated. We could manage all the water that the event center generated, and we could take on some of the campus water, but we couldn't take all of it. And we had to realize what those lines were through our studies. So as we were doing that, we also realized that the way that we managed stormwater was really important to the campus, because if they started taking this approach on all future projects, that pipe that Larry has would get smaller or drier and drier, and there would be no need to upsize it with future projects. So we sat down as a team and came up with a hierarchy for stormwater management. And my hierarchy starting point is probably a little bit different take than most people who've grown up in North Central Texas have, because I grew up in New Mexico. And in New Mexico, we don't have storm drain systems for the most part. In fact, we drain our water from gray into, well, I'm asking gray to green, but in New Mexico, it's gray to brown. And we only get about 12 inches of water, but we get it all in one day. And we manage our water a lot differently there than we do here. And when I first moved here back in 1999, I started talking about some of these things that were just common for me. And I was told real quickly that we can't do that. We have clay soils here, and our clay soils won't let the water infiltrate in. And for a point, that's true. Our clay soils don't have the infiltration rates that sandy soils do. But one of the things that we do with our clay soils is we remove all the organic matter from them, and that's not an important thing to us when we start putting plants back to put organic matter back. I think in the construction process also, we don't pay a lot of attention to restoring soil back to healthy conditions. We have very compacted soils from just a construction site alone. And we need to put some attention into bringing those soils back to being healthy soils that water actually will infiltrate into. So priority number one in our hierarchy was design the site to be a green sponge. Keep flow water across the site and encourage water to go into the soil. I mean, that's just simple step number one. Now I tell you it's simple, and the first time I drove down to the green at College Park after a rain and I saw water standing in the landscape, I had a pit in my stomach and thought, what have I done? Because we don't see that happening around here. We don't do that, so we have to relearn that some things are okay. Now, like you heard earlier, we don't like water to stand in the landscape. We try to design for 24 hours, but yes, 48's the good for mosquitoes. So you don't want standing water there all the time. Reduce impervious surfaces. You know, we made a big impact on this project just by putting some green out there. And slow down the flow of water. And we talked about creating micro depressions and amending the soil. So priority number two, this is where that compromise kind of happened between the landscape architects and the engineers in our offices. We realized we can't manage everything, but we can clean a lot of it before we send it off of our site. And we can hold it on our site and release it in a slower release time than what it would normally happen. So that became our kind of our real simple philosophy: encourage infiltration, and what you can't infiltrate, clean. I won't go over this list real in depth, but the big part of it is we realized that BMPs aren't, you just can't go pick left and right which ones you want to use because you think they're fun. You have to look at which ones are applicable for your site. And the thing that we learned on this side is it actually looked more beneficial to chain them together in a series of BMPs where one flowed into the other. So that was our approach on this project. So what do those things look like when they're built? I'm going to kind of walk you around the site. You're going to have a good overview for it, so when we take a tour, you'll kind of know what some of these things are. And you won't have to listen to me yell at you outside when cars are driving by. But this is a flow-through planter. This is 2nd Street. This is the 3rd Street that Larry talked about, and this is Pecan Avenue, or it's now Spaniello Drive. These planters on this side, I can't point at that. We don't have a lot of real estate right there, but what we do have is a water roof that's draining onto that side. Excuse me. So we had to look at, we aren't going to have a lot of infiltration, but we need to clean that water. And the water coming off of the roof is coming at some pretty high velocities. So we have these flow-through planters that the roof drains actually dump into the flow-through planters, and that's why you're going to see all that rock mulch out there. For small rain gardens, that's not typical, but the velocity of water that we had coming out of some of these roof drains, we were blowing small rock mulch out of the way. Those planters are actually depressed and have some freeboards so they can store some water, and they have a very porous soil in them that water flows through and then a perforated pipe at the bottom of them. Because we are next to an asphalt road, we actually have an HDPE liner that goes up the side of it that prevents that subgrade from underneath the road becoming impacted from the water that we're putting in those planters. Okay, as you walk across the front of the project, there's a fountain at the entry, and this was something that the president of the university wanted, was a fountain at the front entrance. And we had all this condensate being generated from the building. In fact, I was really shocked at the amount of condensate that this building generates, because even in the winter, when you put a lot of bodies together in a big facility, the air conditioner comes on. And the amount of condensate was a little overwhelming. In fact, we still drained some condensate off from this because it makes more than the fountain uses. I was not aware, or I did not think, I thought we were going to have to fill the fountain up with potable water, and then condensate would always keep the level current. But really, they were commissioning the building at the time that the fountain was ready to be filled up, and the condensate filled it up in no time. In fact, we had to drain the fountain 3 times to make some corrections that the contractor needed to address, and each time the condensate filled the fountain up very easily. You will notice when you go out there, there's some mineral deposits on the fountain wall, and we did look at installing some filtering systems that would clean those minerals out of the condensate, and the cost of it was pretty substantial, and we decided that those mineral deposits are just going to be a patina that we live with and that we like, and so we did go through that process. Okay, the dry stream bed. On this side of the facility, we have a lot more real estate to deal with. We've got all of this is Center Street, so we have all of this green space right here. And what's happening on this side is we're actually conveying water from the roof drains, but we also have an underground sump that there's constantly groundwater. There's a high water table that there's water being constantly pumped into there. And there's the larger bank of the HVAC system on this side that's constantly dumping condensate into the dry stream bed. When you go out there, you're going to see that there's actually an irrigation system in the dry stream bed. It is run by soil sensors, and the reason that we have it is because this is the showcase facility for the university, and they always want it to look nice, and they had a little unease about not irrigating something. The irrigation system for that, since the plants have been established, has very rarely come on, or it's come on because somebody changed the programming of the system and they've had to go back and rechange it. So you will see some things there that, hopefully this is a project that shows people you can avoid the irrigation system, but it was a learning lesson for everybody, and it was nice to have for establishment. This site conveys water around the building to a rain garden. We have 2 rain gardens. This one holds all of the water from the special event center. And the purpose of this is to just slowly release water. We do have a porous soil underneath that rain garden, trying to encourage some infiltration. But another important part of the rain garden are the plants that we have in there. This picture was taken 2 months after plants were planted, so they hadn't really grown in and were full, so there's a lot more plants out there right now than what you're seeing in this picture. But the plants are there because they're native plants that like to thrive in drought and flood conditions. They'd be plants that you would find in this type of natural environment in north central Texas. Those plants actually help to with their roots and the organic matter in the soil, start to break down pollutants that are in that soil. So they're very intentionally placed there where we slow the water down and we let the water stand, because we want that water to interface with the plants and the roots in the soil. The rain channel is a channel that goes around, it conveys water from this detention pond or rain planter. There's a series of rock weirs that kind of slow down water, and water will leak out of that rain garden into the rain channel, and then that water is conveyed around this side of the property. When we were doing the design, we got the geotech report back, and we realized that this site actually has some great pockets of sand across the site, and that would kind of go back to the high water table that we have at the event center. that it's kind of indicative of cross timbers, that you have sandy pockets and outcroppings of springs and things like that. So we wanted to take advantage of that sand. So although we have a rain channel here, we actually have an infiltration ditch below it. So it's designed to convey water but also infiltrate water. And during small rain events, it's really, you can see that water is being infiltrated. You don't see as much water as you'd like to see coming through there. This picture that I'm showing you right now, there's a lot of water in the rain channel. And this was taken, was it 2 years ago already? 2 springs ago, when we had all the tornadoes. I think Larry is a very smart man, but on that day he went out chasing stormwater pictures after tornadoes. So I think he had a lapse in judgment. His cohort he took with him moved to Colorado and doesn't work at SRA anymore. I blame that on him too. But this picture has a lot of water there because not only did we have that tornado event with heavy rains, but the day before we had also had a very substantial rain, so that infiltration trench was pretty full. As everything makes its way down to the end of the system, you'll kind of see that this whole project just uses natural site topography to convey water and slow it down and encourage it to infiltrate into the soil, but it ends up here at the rain garden. And this rain garden at the very end of the system is a kind of an outdoor classroom. You'll see the blue benches. It's a place for the university to use to teach some of the philosophies that we've implemented. I think the biology class uses it a lot too, from what I've heard. But this rain garden was very intentional that we wanted people to walk through it. So you'll see that there's a path that goes through it, that you can walk down through it, and that you can actually experience it and understand it. So it's an outdoor classroom. It was also something for us that we use as a learning opportunity for the university to learn about introducing native plants and celebrating seasons, because up at that until that point, a lot of the campus is very evergreen. In fact, I told them that they're Southern gardeners is kind of their style. In fact, this is a whole nother discussion, but we had actually their maintenance staff as part of our design team, where they were in all of the review processes and in all of the decisions that we made. And one of the first things that they did is they took us around their campus to show us what worked and what didn't work. And I didn't see a single plant that we wanted to plant in the rain garden anywhere on campus. So I was a little scared. So we had to work with them on plants that they were familiar with or plants that they were comfortable with. We even took tours of the Metroplex for them to see some great gardens that had some of these so they could understand them and buy off on them, and also give us a lot of input of what they thought would work with their maintenance practices and wouldn't. And we worked through a maintenance plan with them during the design of this. That was really important. But the other important thing of the rain garden, like I said, is for people to understand seasons, but it's also to enjoy how it's always different. In fact, I've had a lot of people come tell me when they go out there, one of the first things they do is they want to see what's in bloom out there, or what's different, or what's happening. It's kind of funny, I even get emails from one of the vice presidents of the university with a picture of, I was at the park today and saw this. And I think that's great because they were some of the ones sometimes that liked everything the same and green year round, and it's exciting to have them sending us pictures. So it really is an outdoor classroom where we're learning a new aesthetic, and I know that was one of the things that you mentioned, is a lot of times there's a connotation that these are very weedy and too unmanicured, and people don't want that look. So I think this is a great example of how you can have some maintain or some bit of order and have people embrace the philosophies. The detention lawn that Larry mentioned is our only space that we have grass. We do have some buffalo grass at the event center, but that's not foot traffic grass. The only place that we have lawn, and you heard us talk earlier on the LID competition that one of the best things that we do for LID is we intentionally limit the amount of activity or lawn that we have to only activity spaces. And that's what this detention lawn is. It's a gathering space. It's a place for students to study and throw a frisbee, but they also have power so they can set up a temporary stage. and have music and events out here. During big rain events, like Larry mentioned, the storm spring will back up and water will flow into this lawn and be stored, and then it slowly drains its way back into the rain garden. Along the parking lot here, this is a massive parking lot, and it wasn't even in our project boundary. It wasn't in our scope. But we were looking at it because if you notice that one part, the before picture, all of that water from that parking lot was coming into the existing drainage channel from that one little bitty space. And what we did is we removed the curb of that parking lot and we put in a sawtooth curb and a rock strip and then vegetation. So we're filtering that parking lot through vegetation, and then it eventually makes its way into the rain garden for more filtering. But you'll also see that the paving right here is a Pervious Paving. When we get out to site, you might have some questions on it, and we have a lot of lessons learned from it, but it is crushed glass. It's recycled glass that's held together with the binder. That water actually percolates through, and then we have a rock base underneath it that water goes through and then drains into the rain garden. It was more a showcase for us. It's a product that has been used in Austin, but not in North Central Texas, so it was an opportunity for us to have it here and see how it works. Like I said, the rain garden is kind of an outdoor classroom and laboratory for us to learn about stormwater management. It's the way that we've looked at it, and that's why we introduced that product. And then at the very end of our structure is Overflow. Like I said, we can't manage everything on our site, and we do have to plan for some water to leave our site. And Larry will talk to you about that.
All right, if you look, this is what we're calling a metered overflow structure. The very low end, you see the slotted opening there. That's going to take care of low event storms. And then right along there is an opening at that level and at that level. That handles the 25 and the 100-year storms, and again allows the water to back up in the rain garden so that we release that at a metered rate. So that's, you can see that once you get out on the site. We'll have Ben out there to talk a little bit more about that. But we just wanted to make sure that we manage the release of water at the end of the project as well. The other thing we have is she was talking about education, Jana was. We have noted several different locations there and described what those were. And what the university plans to do is have signage out there, so again, it can be used as an educational space. And other than that, if you have any questions, we'll answer them now or on the tour.